We will now analyze the code for this project. It will give us an opportunity to learn a lot, and we're going to be able to adapt it to be able to learn all this functionality that we'll be able to use in our own metaverse, okay? So let's open up the code, and as you look at it, what you will see is that we have all these directories here. We've got the controls folder, we've got the renderers. Where are these coming from? Well, they're actually coming from the library of Three.js. So whenever you want to get into this, all of this is available at Three.js. It's actually open source code that's actually available in the Three.js library. The renderers are also the same. These two folders are available in the repository for Three.js, okay? They've simply been imported into the project, okay? But where is the source code for this project? It's actually inside the index.html file. But before I actually get into index.html, I'm going to make reference to three.module.js. This module contains all the imports that we'll be needing in this specific program. So in order for this to work, we need that three.module.js. Okay, now let's go to the index.html file, and we're going to go step by step analyzing the entire code. Okay. What you'll notice is at the beginning, we're setting the title. This title could be anything you want. You can change it. You can put whatever you want. It's actually fully modifiable. Let's change it. Let's call it YouTube Metaverse. And we hit save. Okay. So you see how the title has changed. So let's see what else we want to change here. Well, if we go down, we can find that the background color is actually included in the index.html file. It's actually included in the index.html, which is something we typically avoid because it makes the page too long and the source code is too long. It's kind of hard to work with such a long code, but in this page, it's included in here. And if you want, you can keep it inside the file. So right here, we can find it inside this specific page, okay? But here we have this, the code is inside the HTML page, and that's actually white. We can change it if we want. Actually, all we got to do is we change this number here and it'll change the color of the background, okay? If we want, there, it's not white anymore. Now it's gray. Perfect. For the purposes of this example, let's just leave it white and work with that, okay? So we continue down, and what have we got next? We are getting into the important parts that you need to be aware of, which is the importing of this specific code. This import actually makes reference to three.module.js, which contains all the elements that we need to pull into this specific page. This import is absolutely necessary because it's going to import the full module of Three, okay? But how do you import the full Three module? Well, the way that they do it, you can see the examples. You notice that we choose the script type module, right? And then notice that they import all the modules with the name Three from the module Three, which you've imported right here. You see the three.module.js. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use this and we're actually going to apply it to achieve a purpose. Our objective is we're going to be able to use what are known as orbital curves. I know it's a little strange to say it, but we're going to be using orbital curves. And in the process, we're going to be able to move around the screen with our mouse instead of actually using keyboard. This is very similar to Decentraland, which is a very famous blockchain project. It enables you to move around the mouse, and then you can use the keyboard to actually move around the player. So you can move around the screen with the mouse, and then with the keyboard, you can move around the player. It's a very effective way, and we're going to do that is we're going to be using these controllers that you're seeing right here. You see? This will actually enable us to import what's required. So let's look back at the project. We have actually prepared orbit controls. Now, the orbit controls allow the camera to orbit around a target. And as you'll be seeing here, here is all the code of what we need to do in order to be able to have these orbit controls. We're going to use part of this code in our project further in the course, and you'll be able to see exactly how to do that, okay? So we'll go back to this documentation. It's right here. Let's go back to our project, and if you notice here, we have trackballcontrols.js. This will enable us to move more efficiently the positioning of the metaverse. That's followed by the importing of the renderer. We're actually creating a 3D object composed of YouTube videos, but In order to be able to actually render it, we need the renderer. And as you can see here, we're actually going to be importing the 3D renderer and the 3D object. We need these two modules right here, CSS 3D renderer and CSS 3D object. And it comes from the renderers folder, which we have right here, which we imported. Okay. So let's go to the important parts. How can we actually create a YouTube video in this object that we've created? Well, we create a function, and as we know, that function needs to have parameters. Those parameters need to establish where will this object be located. That is, we need coordinates. So if we're really thinking about where this object is going to be located, we're going to need the X, the Y, the Z. As we look at the different parameters, here we have passing the X, the Y, the Z, which we're actually going to be using in the creation of the videos in YouTube so that we can actually see these videos in a 3D object in the metaverse. So we're going to be creating an element, as you see here. It's got style elements of its own. So we got the width, the height, the background color, and notice what we do is we create a new element using an iframe. This iframe will be the video that we're actually going to be presenting inside this 3D cube we're creating. Every single YouTube video that we're going to see is going to be using this line right here, youtube.com/embed. And immediately after that, we have an ID. That ID is up here, ID, which we are actually going to be able to add to this, okay? So right now what we're going to do is we're going to be embedding a YouTube video using this line, and we will add the ID that will then enable us to be able to have a video that we choose. And here we establish what the object is. We're creating an object that's three-dimensional. We have the XYZ coordinates, and we also establish a rotation. You see, the RY determines that the object will be rotating depending on certain grades. If we make all the objects looking in what direction, there would be no rotation. The RY enables us to rotate that object. Okay, let's move down. From there, we will establish the init function, which will let us initialize the scene. And you also see the animate function, which you already spoke about earlier in the lesson. Okay, we've already used the animate function. And let's look at the init. What exactly is the init? Well, we have a function, and we have a function here that's going to receive these videos, but they still haven't been played anywhere. So we need to then see how these videos are actually played. Well, in order to be able to play the videos, we have to, if we see right here, this init will actually have a section that says the camera, the positioning of the camera, the scene, the render, everything's in place. Here comes the part that actually has this whole purpose, which is how do you add these different videos in? They're actually very easy to add. Here we see the identifier for that video. And if we go down here, we take this link right here, we copy it, and we actually go into a separate link. And if we pop it in there and we embed it, and we're going to take that here code that we have right here, and I copy it, and I go back, and I add that in, what happens? We get an actual video. You see, that is the ID of the video. So you see, that ID corresponds to the video in YouTube and be able to play it through the embed that we've created here. So you see, we have all these videos put right here, and we have the coordinates where we want each one of these. So as you see, we have the XYZ coordinates for each one of the videos. So we have different videos that are rotating. We have them in different positions. So now we have everything together. But let me focus on the rotation, because rotation is the last parameter and it's very important. In this case, it's 0, but it varies. And the way we do that is we use the library math. Math enables us to do a rotation using different angles based on pi. Okay, so that way, if instead of using math.pi divided by 2, I could put math.pi, well, let's see what happens here. It would completely change. You see, this video no longer rotates properly. In order to be able to rotate properly, we use the math library, okay? Which enables us to do this rotation properly, okay? Perfect. So let's go now to the code and notice that there's a link between the different videos. The coordinates link them all. Where one ends, the next one starts. Where one ends, the next one starts. Notice that they're linked together. This is the way that we create the perception that we're creating a square object, because if we change one of these and they're not linked, you'll notice that it's not going to match. You see, it's not a square anymore because the coordinates don't match. You could do the same and you could position it where you want, by controlling where the coordinates are placed, okay? So this way we're creating a group. This group has 4 elements, and you'll see these 4 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4 elements. Those 4 videos are linked together. Now I'm going to take you to a different control. Notice this control right here called trackball controls, okay? And you're passing to the camera and the renderer. What does this really do and why do we use it? What this enables us to do is be able to move the camera around the metaverse, okay? And this enables us to move around the space by using the trackball, okay? So what we're doing is we're controlling here. Now, let's go further down here, and in the animation, we can actually comment in the line that says controls update, and let's see what happens when we do that, okay? So let's see what happens in the metaverse. If we comment that line out, even if I move the mouse, it doesn't move anymore. It used to move before. Let's remove that comment right here. And what happens? We can move the object around. You see? That controller lets us move around the metaverse using the mouse. This is a functionality that we're going to use further in the course into our code, okay? But what else can we learn from this project that we're looking at? In fact, let's look at this code. It's actually not that much code. Let's just see what else we can use. And let's see what we can learn from here. One that I'd like to bring up is this function right here that's going to be called onWindowResize. This is actually very, very coveted. And it's very valuable because it lets the window adapt to the size of the browser. That is, it readapts and adjusts to what the browser window looks like. Okay, so let's take a look at it right now. If we actually close right now this browser, notice how everything's adapting, you see? But let's see what happens right now if we comment out that line, and let's take a look at what happens now. If we move it, notice the object does not readapt. And it's because the window is not resizing. We cannot have that. We need to have an object that adapts to the browser window we have without actually having to constantly update where the browser is looking. So we got to make sure we use that line. This is a very valuable line. And what it does, it listens for an event. And when it listens and hears that event, it resizes the browser window, calling the function onWindowResize, which is right here. You see? This function changes the aspect for that browser window. You see? What it does is it changes the aspect of the camera based on the dimensions of the window of the browser. And here we have practically everything that we need. Here's where we have all the events that are generated whenever an action is being taken over this 3D object in this metaverse. And this function is actually about start or end. Each one of us is going to generate a style display, a visualization display. And this is these are adaptations for this project, which we really don't need for our project. But as we go through, finally, we have here the animate function and the, onWindowResize, which we spoke about right here, which actually changes the aspect based on the browser window. So we have everything we need. In fact, we know all of this by this point. We've got the animation. And by this point, what we're going to do is we're going to do the update of the controls by using the mouse, okay? All of this source code is everything that you see on screen. In fact, at first glance, it looks like overkill to fit all this into an index.html file, but don't worry about it. It's actually quite simple, and we're going to be able to add all those to our very own code.